My name is Emma Carter. I am 36 years old. This is the story of how I discovered that the man I trusted with my whole heart had been living a second life behind my back, and how the greatest betrayal of my life eventually became the greatest blessing I never expected. When Daniel and I married, we believed our future would unfold like everyone else's. We imagined buying our first home, building successful careers, and eventually filling a nursery with laughter. We never imagined that 8 years later, the nursery would still be empty, while our hearts carried a silence too heavy for words. The first year passed without worry. The second brought questions. By the third, every family gathering felt like an interrogation. "So, any good news yet?" People would ask with sympathetic smiles that somehow hurt more than cruel words. I always smiled politely. "Soon, we hope." Inside, I was breaking. Daniel would squeeze my hand under the dinner table whenever someone asked about children. Later, on the drive home, he'd glance at me and say, "Don't let them get to you, Em. We'll have our family when the time is right." I believed him. We visited fertility specialists across London. Every appointment ended with another blood test, another scan, another expensive treatment plan, another month of hope followed by disappointment. Some doctors found nothing obviously wrong. Others suggested unexplained infertility. One recommended IVF. Another encouraged us to keep trying naturally. Every opinion came with another bill and another emotional roller coaster. Still, I refused to lose faith. Every Sunday, I sat beside Daniel in church, praying quietly while couples around us held babies or walked hand in hand with toddlers. During special prayer services for families longing for children, I walked forward with tears streaming down my face, believing God still remembered my name. Daniel prayed with me. He fasted beside me. He held me after every negative pregnancy test. At night, when he was asleep, I often cried silently into my pillow because I didn't want him carrying my pain as well as his own. I blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't praying hard enough. Maybe my body had failed us. Maybe I wasn't enough. Daniel never blamed me. At least, not where I could hear. His kindness became my anchor. Whenever I apologized for something neither of us could control, he'd cup my face gently. "Emma," he'd whisper, "you are my wife, not a baby-making machine. I married you because I love you." Those words healed me over and over again. But the world outside our home wasn't nearly as gentle. Friends who married years after us announced second pregnancies. Baby showers became invitations I quietly declined. Social media turned into a gallery of smiling newborns and growing families I desperately wanted to celebrate, but secretly envied. Then there was Margaret, my mother-in-law. She rarely insulted me directly. Instead, she mastered the art of indirect cruelty. "When I was your age," she'd say over Sunday lunch, "Daniel was already in primary school." Or she'd smile at a neighbor's grandchild before sighing loudly. There's nothing sweeter than hearing little feet running around. Every sentence landed exactly where she intended. Sometimes she'd bring herbal remedies she'd read about online. Other times she'd recommend another specialist or another church conference. She insisted she was only trying to help. But every suggestion reminded me of what I still didn't have. I never answered back. Instead, I smiled, thanked her politely, and cried in private later. Daniel usually defended me. "Mom, enough," he'd say firmly. "We're handling this." She would nod, then begin again the following week. Despite everything, my love for Daniel never changed. If anything, those difficult years made me cherish him more. I trusted him completely. I believed we were carrying the same burden together. I had no idea that while I was praying for our future with every ounce of faith I possessed, unseen cracks were beginning to spread beneath the foundation of our marriage. And those cracks would soon become impossible to ignore. The quiet strength that had carried us through 8 years of disappointment slowly began to change, although I couldn't see it happening at the time. I was still believing that Daniel and I were standing on the same side of every storm. What I didn't know was that someone had been working tirelessly to pull him away from me. Margaret stopped making subtle comments. She became direct. One Sunday afternoon, after lunch at her house, she looked straight at Daniel and said, A family without children is unfinished. You need someone to carry your name. The room fell silent. Daniel cleared his throat. Mom, we've talked about this. No, she replied firmly. You've avoided it. Emma is a good woman, but 8 years is a long time. I lowered my eyes, pretending to focus on my tea while my heart quietly shattered. Daniel reached for my hand. We're still believing. Margaret shook her head. Belief doesn't continue a family line. Those words followed me home. That night, Daniel held me while I cried. I'm sorry she keeps saying those things, he whispered. It's not your fault. I wanted to believe that would be the end of it. Instead, it was only the beginning. Margaret began calling Daniel almost every evening. Sometimes he stepped outside to answer. Sometimes he spoke in his home office with the door closed. When I asked if everything was all right, he smiled. It's just Mom worrying too much. I accepted the explanation. Looking back now, I wish I had asked more questions. Weeks turned into months. Margaret's pressure intensified. She reminded Daniel that his late father had dreamed of grandchildren. She spoke about carrying on the Carter family name as though it were his only responsibility. She cried on the phone, telling him she feared she would die without holding one of his children. She even accused him of choosing his wife over his own family. Daniel was trapped between the woman who raised him and the woman he had promised to love for life. I could see the exhaustion on his face. His smile became less frequent. He stared into space more often. Some nights he barely touched his dinner. Whenever I asked what was wrong, he would simply say work had become stressful. I believed him because trust had always been the language of our marriage. One evening, after another family gathering I chose not to attend, Daniel returned home unusually quiet. He sat beside me on the sofa for a long time before saying softly, "Do you ever wonder why God keeps saying no?" I looked at him. I don't think he's saying no. What if he is? I took both his hands. Then we'll keep walking together until he says yes. He smiled sadly. I hope you're right. I didn't realize he was already beginning to lose hope. Margaret saw his vulnerability and used it. She started presenting another idea. At first, she mentioned it cautiously. In some situations, she told him, a second marriage saves a family. Daniel refused immediately. I'm not betraying Emma. But Margaret refused to let the matter rest. Every conversation returned to the same subject. She insisted a child mattered more than appearances. She argued that many marriages quietly survived arrangements people never discussed publicly. She promised Emma would never have to know. She called it a sacrifice. She called it wisdom. She called it the only practical solution. Daniel resisted for weeks, perhaps months. He still loved me. That much was true. But constant emotional pressure has a way of wearing down even good people when fear replaces conviction. Margaret cried. She pleaded. She reminded him of his duty. Finally, she delivered the sentence that broke his resolve. If you truly love your wife, she said, don't make her carry the shame forever. Give this family a child quietly and let everyone keep their dignity. That twisted logic settled into his heart. Instead of trusting time, he trusted desperation. Instead of standing beside me, he began making decisions without me. The husband who had once promised we would face every trial together slowly accepted a secret that would destroy everything we had built. I still slept peacefully beside him each night, believing our marriage was safe. I had no idea that while I thanked God for giving me such a faithful husband, plans were already being made that would soon turn my entire world upside down. Daniel never told me the moment he finally agreed to his mother's plan. To me, life continued as it always had. We still ate dinner together. We still attended church on Sundays. We still prayed before bed. He still kissed my forehead every morning before leaving for work. I never imagined that while I was trusting him with my whole heart, he was quietly building another life beyond my reach. Margaret wasted no time. Within days of convincing Daniel, she contacted her lifelong friend, Susan Brooks. Susan had a 24-year-old daughter named Olivia. Margaret described Olivia as kind, respectful, beautiful, and eager to settle down. She assured Daniel that Olivia would make no demands, ask no questions, and would accept whatever arrangement he offered. Daniel hesitated. "I don't want to hurt Emma," Margaret answered coldly. "She never has to know." That single sentence became the foundation of every lie that followed. What Daniel didn't know was that Margaret herself had been deceived. Olivia wasn't the innocent young woman she claimed to be. 3 weeks before Margaret approached her, Olivia had discovered she was pregnant by her boyfriend, Nathan. They had been dating for over a year, and she believed they would eventually marry. Instead, Nathan denied the pregnancy. He accused her of trying to trap him. Within days, he blocked her number, moved out of his apartment, and disappeared from her life completely. Olivia panicked. She knew the truth would damage her reputation. When Margaret's unexpected proposal arrived, she saw something she hadn't expected, a way to hide her pregnancy behind another man's name. She accepted immediately. Neither she nor her mother revealed the truth. Margaret was thrilled. She believed God had finally answered her prayers. Everything happened quietly. Daniel paid the bride price in a small private ceremony attended by only a handful of people. No relatives from my side were informed. No announcements were made. No wedding photographs appeared online. The entire arrangement was designed to remain invisible. I was told Daniel had traveled for an important business conference that weekend. I even packed his suitcase. I ironed his shirts. I kissed him goodbye at the front door. "Travel safely," I smiled. "I will," he replied, unable to meet my eyes for more than a second. That was the day he secretly married another woman. Soon afterward, Daniel rented a comfortable apartment in Manchester. His work had occasionally taken him there over the years, so another business assignment raised no suspicion. He furnished the apartment himself. He bought new furniture, kitchen appliances, and baby supplies months before I even knew another woman existed. Margaret insisted Olivia receive excellent prenatal care. Daniel registered her at a respected private hospital and paid every medical bill without hesitation. He attended appointments whenever work allowed. He listened to the baby's heartbeat. He watched ultrasound scans. Each moment convinced him he had finally become the father he had dreamed of being. He ignored the small voice inside him, asking whether the dates truly made sense. He wanted the child to be his so desperately that he never questioned the timing. Back home, I noticed nothing unusual. Or perhaps I noticed everything but trusted love more than suspicion. Occasionally, Daniel looked distracted. Sometimes he stared at his phone before quickly locking the screen. He became more protective of his privacy. When messages arrived late at night, he stepped into another room before replying. I assumed they were work-related. After all, I had never known him to lie. Our finances also began to change. He explained that a new investment opportunity required extra cash. We postponed renovating our kitchen. We delayed the holiday we had been planning. I even encouraged him. "If it helps our future," I said, "it's worth it." He thanked me with a guilty smile. I unknowingly helped fund the life he had hidden from me. Looking back now, I realize he wasn't an evil man. He was a weak man who kept making one dishonest decision after another, believing each lie would somehow protect everyone involved. Instead, every secret became another brick in the wall separating us. Meanwhile, Olivia settled comfortably into her new life, confident her plan had worked perfectly. She believed she had secured financial stability for herself and her unborn child. Margaret believed she would soon become the proud grandmother she had longed to be. Daniel believed he had solved an impossible problem. And I continued thanking God every night for giving me a husband I thought I could trust completely, never imagining that the truth was already growing beneath another woman's heartbeat, waiting for the day it would finally come into the light. The weeks that followed changed our marriage in ways I couldn't fully explain. Nothing happened suddenly. It was the little things. The kind of little things you dismiss because you love someone. Daniel began traveling almost every weekend. At first, it sounded reasonable. "Our Manchester office is expanding," he told me one Friday evening as he packed another overnight bag. "They need me there until things settle down." I smiled and helped him fold his clothes. "You've been working so hard lately." "I know." When all this is over, we'll finally take that trip to Scotland. He forced a smile. I'd like that. Those trips became our new normal. Friday evenings belonged to business. Saturday mornings were spent in another city. He usually returned late Sunday night looking exhausted. I stopped asking questions because every answer sounded believable. But something inside me began whispering that our lives no longer fit together the way they once had. His laughter became rare. Our conversations grew shorter. He no longer reached for my hand as often while we watched television. Sometimes I caught him staring at me with an expression I couldn't understand. It looked like guilt. At the time, I thought it was sadness. One evening I walked into the kitchen while he was texting someone. The moment he saw me, he locked his phone and slipped it into his pocket. I laughed awkwardly. You act like you're guarding state secrets. He chuckled, but it sounded forced. Just work. Work at 9:30 on a Tuesday? The Manchester team never seems to sleep. I nodded. The explanation made sense. Still, a strange feeling settled deep inside my heart. I tried to ignore it. I reminded myself that suspicion destroys marriages. Trust builds them. So I chose trust. Our bank account also started changing. There were larger withdrawals than usual. Several unfamiliar payments appeared on our monthly statements. When I asked about them, Daniel calmly explained they were connected to business travel, accommodation, and entertaining clients. I accepted every explanation. Why wouldn't I? This was the man who had stood beside me through 8 painful years of infertility. The man who had wiped away my tears after every failed treatment. The man I believed would never intentionally hurt me. Yet my spirit refused to settle. Every night after Daniel fell asleep, I found myself praying longer than before. God, I whispered, if something is wrong, please show me. And if I'm allowing fear to cloud my judgment, give me peace. Sometimes I cried without understanding why. Sometimes I woke from dreams where Daniel was walking away from me while I stood calling his name. I never told him. I didn't want him to think I doubted his love. One Sunday after church, a friend casually asked, "Is Daniel enjoying all those Manchester trips?" I smiled. "He says work is keeping him busy." She laughed. "I hope they appreciate him. My husband would complain if he had to travel that much." Her words stayed with me all afternoon. Even strangers thought the travel was excessive. Still, I defended him. That evening, Daniel announced another weekend away. I simply nodded. "I'll miss you." "I'll miss you too." But he didn't sound convincing. As the months passed, I realized something else had changed. Whenever we discussed having children, Daniel quietly changed the subject. The man who once prayed with me every night now avoided conversations about fertility clinics, adoption, or future treatments. It was as though he had already given up. I couldn't understand why. One rainy Thursday, while folding laundry, I found a receipt in the pocket of one of his jackets. It was from a pharmacy in Manchester. The items listed included prenatal vitamins and maternity products. I stared at the paper for several long seconds. My first thought wasn't betrayal. It was confusion. Perhaps he was buying medicine for a colleague's wife. Perhaps someone at work had asked for help. I folded the receipt and placed it back exactly where I'd found it. Then I hated myself for even wondering. "You're imagining things, Emma," I whispered aloud. "Daniel loves you." That was the sentence I repeated over and over until I almost believed it again. Love made me patient. Love made me forgiving. But love also made me blind. While I was fighting my own doubts and asking God to protect my marriage, someone else was living the life that should have belonged to me. I didn't know it yet, but the answers I had been praying for were already making their way toward me. They would not come through another hospital test. They would not come through another church service. They would arrive through someone who loved me enough to tell me a truth that would break my heart before it finally set me free. The answer to my prayers came on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon. I was working from home when my phone rang. The screen showed the name Rachel. Rachel Bennett had been my closest friend since university. She had moved to Manchester several years earlier after marrying her husband, Andrew. But distance had never changed our friendship. We spoke almost every week and visited each other whenever we could. I answered with a smile. Hey, Ratch. How are you? There was silence. Too much silence. Finally, she spoke. Emma, are you alone? The seriousness in her voice made my stomach tighten. Yes. What's wrong? She took a deep breath. I don't know how to tell you this. My heart began beating faster. Rachel, you're scaring me. I went to St. Mary's Hospital this morning for a follow-up appointment. I listened quietly. While I was waiting near the maternity unit, I saw someone who looked exactly like Daniel. I frowned. Daniel? In Manchester? Yes. He told me he had meetings today. I know. Her voice trembled. Emma, he wasn't alone. The room suddenly felt smaller. What do you mean? He was with a heavily pregnant woman. I couldn't breathe. For a moment, I forgot how. No. I wanted to believe I was mistaken. Rachel continued carefully. So I stayed where I was. I watched without letting them see me. I closed my eyes. They walked into the maternity clinic together. He was holding her handbag while she signed some paperwork. Every word landed like a stone. I kept telling myself it couldn't be Daniel. She paused again. But then he smiled at her, the same smile I've seen him give you for years. Tears filled my eyes. I followed them from a distance. My hands began shaking. I saw him put his arm around her before they entered the examination room. The silence between us became unbearable. Are you sure? I whispered. I prayed I was wrong. Another pause. I waited outside until they came back out. I saw his face clearly, Emma. My world stopped. It felt as though someone had pulled the floor from beneath me. 8 years. 8 years of trust. 8 years of believing we were carrying the same burden. I couldn't make sense of what Rachel was telling me. I don't understand. I know. He told me he was in meetings. I know. He wouldn't. Rachel interrupted gently. I'm so sorry. I began crying quietly. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just silent tears rolling down my face as every strange moment from the past several months suddenly connected itself. The weekend trips. The late-night phone calls. The hidden messages. The unexplained expenses. The pharmacy receipt. None of it seemed innocent anymore. Rachel spoke softly. I didn't approach him. Why? I wanted to be certain before saying anything to you. I appreciated that. If someone else had told me this without proof, I might have defended Daniel. Instead, Rachel had taken time to observe carefully before calling. What should I do? I asked. She answered immediately. Don't confront him yet. I wiped my eyes. I need to know the truth. And you will. Her voice became firm. Let me help. That evening Daniel came home carrying flowers. He kissed my forehead exactly as he always did. Long day. I forced a smile. A little. He looked at me for a moment. Are you all right? I've just been tired. The lie tasted bitter. For the first time in our marriage, I looked into my husband's eyes knowing he was hiding something from me. And for the first time, I hid something from him too. I didn't mention Rachel's phone call. I didn't ask about Manchester. I didn't mention the pregnant woman. Instead, I watched him. Every movement, every expression, every word. After dinner, he stepped outside to answer another phone call. When he returned, he said casually, "Looks like I'll need to travel again this weekend." I simply nodded. All right. He looked relieved that I hadn't asked questions. That reaction alone told me more than words ever could. Later that night, while he slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't planning an argument. I wanted facts. If my marriage was truly falling apart, I wanted the truth to be undeniable. The next morning, Rachel called again. I've been thinking. So have I. I believe I can get close to the woman. I sat upright. How? Leave that to me. I hesitated. Be careful. I will. What if we're wrong? Rachel answered with quiet certainty. If we're wrong, you'll gain peace. And if we're right. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Because deep inside my heart, I already feared I knew exactly what she was going to discover. Rachel kept her promise. She never rushed. She never acted recklessly. She understood that if we were going to uncover the truth, it had to be done carefully. One mistake could make everything disappear before we knew the full story. A week after our phone call, she contacted me. I've seen her again. I immediately stopped what I was doing. Where? At a cafe across from the hospital. Did she recognize you?
No.
To her, I'm just another customer. Over the next few weeks, Rachel slowly made herself familiar. It started with a polite smile, then a brief conversation while waiting for coffee. Another day, she offered to help Olivia carry a shopping bag because she was heavily pregnant. From there, the conversations became natural. Rachel never asked personal questions too quickly. Instead, she listened. She laughed. She shared harmless stories about herself. Little by little, Olivia lowered her guard. One afternoon, Rachel called me after meeting her again. I think she's beginning to trust me. I closed my eyes. Please be careful. I will. Days turned into weeks. Their friendship grew stronger. They had lunch together several times. Rachel even accompanied Olivia to a maternity appointment when Daniel couldn't make it because of work. Listening to Rachel describe those meetings broke my heart. Another woman was receiving the attention and support that should have belonged to me. Yet I remained patient. I wanted the complete truth. Then one Friday evening, everything changed. Rachel called me, her voice unusually calm. Emma? What happened? I have it. You have what? The truth. My hands began trembling. Rachel explained that earlier that afternoon, she and Olivia had been sitting in a quiet cafe after a hospital visit. Olivia seemed unusually cheerful. She had started talking about how lucky she felt. Rachel simply listened. Then, without realizing what she was doing, Olivia began revealing everything. Rachel had secretly started recording the conversation on her phone. My heart pounded as Rachel played the audio for me. Olivia's voice was clear. She laughed before saying, "Life can be funny sometimes." Rachel asked casually, "Why do you say that?" Olivia chuckled again. "Because I was actually pregnant before I ever met Daniel." I felt every drop of blood leave my face. Rachel stayed quiet, allowing Olivia to continue. "My boyfriend, Nathan, got me pregnant." She laughed bitterly. "The moment I told him, he disappeared." Rachel asked softly, "That must have been difficult." "It was for about a week." Olivia laughed again. "Then fate rescued me." Rachel asked, "How?" "A woman named Margaret came looking for a wife for her son." There was another laugh. "Can you believe it?" Rachel remained calm. "So Daniel doesn't know?"
No.
Another laugh. "He still believes this baby is his." I covered my mouth as tears streamed down my face. Olivia continued speaking with shocking confidence. His wife couldn't have children. So, I figured, why not let everyone believe this baby belongs to him? Rachel asked carefully, "Aren't you afraid the truth will come out?" Olivia sounded almost amused. "Not unless I tell someone." She laughed again. His mother was so desperate for a grandchild that nobody even questioned the timing. Then came the sentence that shattered whatever hope I still had. "I honestly feel sorry for his wife, but not sorry enough to give up this comfortable life." Rachel said nothing. Olivia continued, "She's probably somewhere praying for a miracle while I'm carrying another man's baby." She laughed loudly. "I guess being barren has its disadvantages." The recording ended. I couldn't speak. I couldn't cry anymore. I simply sat there in silence. Every suspicion, every lie, every unanswered question, all of it had finally come together. Daniel had betrayed me. Margaret had manipulated him. Olivia had deceived them both. An innocent marriage had been sacrificed because of fear, pride, and dishonesty. Rachel finally broke the silence. "I'm coming to see you tomorrow." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "Thank you. You don't have to face this alone." That night, Daniel returned home smiling. He asked about my day. He kissed my forehead. He told me he loved me. I looked at the man I had shared 8 years of my life with and realized something heartbreaking. The husband I loved still existed, but the man standing before me had buried him beneath so many lies that I no longer recognized the person he had become. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I simply waited. because now I wasn't relying on suspicion. I had the truth. And the truth had a voice. It was recorded forever. I barely slept that night. Surprisingly, it wasn't because I was planning a confrontation. It was because I was mourning, not the end of my marriage, that had already ended the day Daniel chose deception over honesty. I was mourning the man I believed I had married, the man who once held my hands in hospital waiting rooms, the man who wiped away my tears after every negative pregnancy test, the man who promised we would face every disappointment together. By morning, I felt strangely calm. Rachel arrived just after 10. She hugged me without saying a word. Neither of us cried. There were no dramatic speeches. She simply placed her phone on the dining table. The recording is here. I nodded. Thank you for standing by me. You would have done the same for me. That evening, Daniel came home earlier than usual. He smiled as he walked into the house. I brought your favorite cheesecake. I looked at the box in his hand. 8 years together, and he still remembered the little things. That somehow made everything hurt even more. Daniel, I said quietly, can we talk? His smile faded. Of course. We sat across from each other at the dining table. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the simplest question I could think of. Have you been honest with me? He looked confused. What do you mean? I held his gaze. Is there anything about your life that I don't know? His face remained calm. No. That single word broke the last piece of my heart. I reached for my phone. I want you to listen to something. I pressed play. The room filled with Olivia's voice. I was actually pregnant before I ever met Daniel. Daniel frowned. Then his expression changed. My boyfriend, Nathan, got me pregnant. His breathing became uneven. Daniel still believes this baby is his. His face turned pale. His wife couldn't have children. He closed his eyes. She's probably somewhere praying for a miracle while I'm carrying another man's baby. When the recording ended, silence filled the room. Daniel didn't move.
He didn't speak.
He simply stared at the table as though his entire world had collapsed in front of him. Finally, he whispered, Emma? I raised my hand gently.
No.
He looked at me with tears in his eyes. I can explain. I don't need an explanation. I made a terrible mistake. Many terrible mistakes. His voice shook. My mother. I interrupted him. Your mother didn't marry another woman. He lowered his head. She pressured me. But you chose. He began crying. I thought I was doing what was best. For who? He had no answer. I never stopped loving you. I smiled sadly. And yet you lied to me every single day. The room became painfully quiet again. After a long pause, I stood up. I've already spoken to a solicitor. His eyes widened. What? I've filed for divorce. He stood so quickly his chair nearly fell over. No. Emma, please. I can't. We can fix this. I slowly shook my head. A marriage can survive infertility. I looked directly into his eyes. It cannot survive deliberate betrayal. He fell to his knees. I'm sorry. I know. Please don't leave. I picked up my handbag. I already lost my husband a long time ago. I walked toward the front door. Before leaving, I turned back one final time. I truly hope one day you forgive yourself. Then I left. The divorce was finalized a few months later. We never argued over money or property. I wanted only one thing.
Peace.
Not long afterward, Daniel drove to Manchester and confronted Olivia. According to people who later told me what happened, he demanded the truth. Is the baby mine? Olivia didn't deny it anymore. She folded her arms and answered without shame.
No.
Daniel stared at her in disbelief. You knew all along? Yes. My mother didn't know. I know. And you still accepted everything? She shrugged. I did what I needed to survive. Daniel asked quietly, Did you ever love me? She laughed. I barely knew you. Those words crushed whatever hope he had left. He asked her to leave the apartment immediately. She packed her belongings without protest. By the end of that day, he had lost the child he believed was his. He had lost the woman he secretly married. And months earlier, he had already lost the wife who truly loved him. Only then did he understand that the greatest tragedy wasn't being childless. It was destroying the one person who had never stopped standing beside him. Walking away from my marriage was the hardest decision I had ever made.
But it was also the healthiest.
For months after the divorce, I focused on rebuilding the parts of myself I had neglected for years. I continued working as a financial consultant, surrounded myself with genuine friends, traveled more often, and returned to hobbies I had abandoned while chasing the dream of motherhood. Most importantly, I found peace again. There were still nights when I cried, not because I wanted Daniel back, but because I grieved the life I thought we would have together. Healing wasn't quick. It wasn't perfect. But little by little, my heart stopped carrying the weight of someone else's choices. About 2 years later, Rachel invited me to a charity fundraising dinner. I almost declined. Instead, I decided it was time to start living again. That evening, I met Michael Turner. He was kind without trying to impress anyone. A widower in his early 40s, he had lost his wife to cancer several years earlier and had spent that time quietly rebuilding his own life. We talked for hours. Not once did he ask whether I had children. Not once did he make me feel incomplete.
He simply wanted to know me.
For the first time in years, I felt truly seen. Our friendship grew naturally. Months later, it became love. Before we married, I told him everything. Every hospital visit, every tear, every betrayal, every lie. When I finished, I expected silence. Instead, Michael reached across the table and held my hand. "You were never the problem, Emma." Those words healed wounds I didn't even know were still open. We married in a small ceremony surrounded by people who genuinely loved us. There was no pressure, no manipulation, no hidden secrets, only honesty. 3 months after our wedding, I stood in my bathroom holding a pregnancy test. I stared at it in disbelief. Then I checked it again. And again. Positive. I sat on the floor crying so hard I could barely breathe. Not tears of pain. Tears of gratitude. When I showed Michael the test, he wrapped me in his arms and whispered, "God's timing is always better than ours." 9 months later, we welcomed a healthy baby girl into the world. Holding her for the first time, I understood something that had taken me years to learn. Delayed blessings are not denied blessings. Sometimes life protects us by making us wait. Rachel became my daughter's godmother. She often smiled and said, "I'm glad the truth found you when it did."
So was I.
As for Daniel, life did not unfold the way he expected. After several years, he remarried. His second marriage began with hope. But month after month passed without a pregnancy. Then another year. Then another. Doctors examined both of them. This time, the results revealed something Daniel had never imagined. The fertility issue had been his all along. The diagnosis explained everything. It explained the 8 childless years we had shared. It explained why Olivia's baby had never been his. It explained the pain that had destroyed our marriage. When I heard the news through mutual friends, I didn't celebrate. I didn't believe it was revenge. I simply felt sadness. If only he had agreed to complete testing years earlier instead of allowing fear and pressure to guide his decisions. Margaret changed too. She carried deep regret for the role she had played. By the time she realized her mistakes, there was nothing left to repair. She had lost the daughter-in-law who loved her despite the insults. She had watched her son's marriage collapse under the weight of her interference. She finally understood that forcing God's timing only creates unnecessary suffering. Looking back now, I no longer define my life by betrayal. I define it by survival. I learned that love without honesty cannot endure. I learned that outside voices should never be allowed to rule a marriage. Most of all, I learned that faith is strongest when it refuses to surrender during seasons of waiting. If my story reaches someone standing in the middle of heartbreak, I hope you remember this. Never allow desperation to make decisions that integrity should make. Trust cannot exist without truth. Marriage cannot survive where deception lives. And God's timing, though sometimes painfully slow, has a beautiful way of arriving exactly when our hearts are finally ready to receive it.